Welcome back. So, obviously, that was a pretty intense, exciting quarterfinal playoff for the NBA. Now, of course, everything is clarified. We know what's going on moving forward. Obviously, that was just confirmed today. And we'll talk about that and how disappointed I am in some points and how excited I am about others. But let's move to it and we can break it down a little more in sync. So here we go. So this was my original bracket breakdown. If you've watched my earlier videos, you've seen this, so you know nothing has been changed or obviously updated, even though I spelled the Knicks wrong. uh, but obviously, I had Boston, Indiana, Denver, and Dallas all going through into the semifinals, with Boston and Denver meeting in the NBA playoffs, with Denver repeating. So let's just break it down from the East to the West first. So obviously, Boston, Cleveland. I gave Cleveland a chance because I don't think Boston has a very deep squad this year. But obviously, things changed as the season or as the playoffs progressed. Injuries kicked in. Obviously, Cleveland's big man, Allen, and obviously the big man for Boston were also hurt. So that kind of played off of each other. And then it came down to who was really going to be better in the clutch. We know Boston obviously has a lot of experience, so that fared well for them. On the other side, you have Indiana and the Knicks, and the Knicks have been playing great. Their guard rotation playing well above what I think most people could expect for them. Whereas Indiana, I think the depth and the size they weren't really utilizing really as much as they could. With Denver and Minnesota, I said from day one that I think this was going to be the most interesting, most high level, and most intense playoff bracket, probably in the complete whole NBA playoffs. And it did not let me down. And then, of course, Oak City versus Dallas. Dallas has really sort of picked up in the second half since they made some second half trades to pick up bigger men, which obviously solidified their defense. For Oak City, I felt going into the playoffs, the problem with them is they didn't have too much depth in the big man position. And I felt eventually that was going to bite them in the ass. I said, I don't know who's going to win. Well, I mean, I predicted Dallas, but out of the Clippers or Dallas. But I said that in my earlier videos, I felt it didn't matter. Whoever won that round was going to beat Oak City. And so you can see my predictions. So far, so good. I wish I would have put some money on it, even though obviously Denver would have crapped me out. But let's get to it, breaking it down. Obviously, today, the last game was a 7-game series between Minnesota and Denver in Denver, which, you know, historically, there's a 75% chance that the team playing at home in a game 7 wins. But then we saw 2 games today in that situation, and both of them did not play out the way history has dictated. So let that be a warning. You can't necessarily use numbers and history to say how things are going to pan out. If you'd watched this series from day one, you saw that Minnesota had won multiple games in Denver, and Denver was not performing to the extent that really people felt that they would or should have. One of the things about playing at home, which you had to give Denver a little bit of advantage about, was the fact that generally your bench players perform far better at home than they do on the road. And you know, this was obviously going to be a key element in this series because Minnesota, depth-wise and bench-wise, have really been performing fantastic. And in this playoff series, that was the difference. You could see that from today's game. Obviously, the 2 stars for Denver, Murray and Joker, both performed great, put up great numbers, 70 points basically between the 2 of them. But then you look at Gordon, who was really an energizer bunny for this team and really came through a lot during this playoff run. But today he disappeared, did not do too much at all. What's his face? Porter, who's been shooting the lights out until this series, continued to sort of underperform. The bench didn't perform, not at all. So this really breaks down why this team ended up winning, Minnesota. Bench is very important in the playoffs, and having players that come off the bench that really can contribute and give you big moments, give your star players an opportunity to rest. I mean, Joker rested how much time during this seventh game? Maybe 2 minutes over the whole game. Not much. And this obviously takes a lot out of you. I think they should have been playing my big man that they had, who played very well during the regular season in spot minutes. Defensively, he definitely adds an element that the Joker doesn't. Very good shot blocker, very good length. Not the scorer and the kind of guy you run the offense through, but coming off the bench to try to solidify your bench defense, right? Just so the other team can't take advantage of your bench players and score a lot. I thought he was going to be an important element to it. Him and Watson, two very long, very good defenders. And then you add some shooters off the bench, like the point guard, sorry, escapes my name now, and obviously Hardaway as well. And then you really have a quality bench coming, bench performers. Obviously bringing defense and three-point shooting. And it's just what you need to get through those moments. Obviously, you don't need your bench to carry you, but you definitely want to get quality minutes. And Minnesota got that. Who is the guy from Arkansas? Is he from Arkansas? Uh, Sixth man of the year. Why can't I think of his name? He played brilliantly today, right? Defensively, they were triple teaming the Joker at points. He got quite a few block shots or a lot of helps. Really came through for them. And this was easily the difference in the game. And this is really why I see Minnesota going on to become this year's NBA champion. And I did say from day one that I thought the team that came out of this part of the NBA playoff seeding was the team that was going to win, because I felt comfortable that Boston would probably win. Obviously, with them getting injured in the playoffs, I did felt maybe that could impact them. Especially an Indiana team that has real good depth and good height on the inside. Maybe they could take advantage, and we'll talk about that when we move forward. But I didn't think Boston was ever going to compete with Minnesota or Denver, right? And I felt the team that won was definitely coming from the West this year. And I can't be sad to see that probably it's going to be Minnesota, because early on the year on my old channel, which was unfortunately shut down, because there's a lot of scummy people on the internet, I said that a star was born, that I thought Ant-Man was going to be taking over the NBA, was one of the best young players in the league, and he did not disappoint this year. Obviously, my Canadian brethren, Gilchrist Alexander, is one of those. I mean, John Morant, before he started pulling guns left, right, and center, definitely was right there as well. And now you show Edwards. And Edwards has just progressively gotten better and better and better. He's a down-to-earth dude. When you listen to him in interviews, you can't not like him. He's a very likable character, right? As a young guy, he doesn't take shit too serious. He doesn't have the killer, I want to rip your head off mentality of a Kobe or a Michael Jordan. But yet, nonetheless, you cheer for him, and you know that he wants to win and wants to win really badly. And obviously, he brings something different to his team, right? Leadership, but from a very positive perspective, not the perspective of a Kobe or Jordan who are going to potentially humiliate you in front of your teammates. And you can see this in the way Minnesota performed today. And didn't really perform very well. I think he shot 6 of 24 from the field, if I can think off the top of my head. So he definitely needed the rest of his team to pick him up, and they did. They did, and that's because they play with somebody that they know has their back and supports them, and vice versa. And so this Minnesota team is going to be really interesting to see what they do against Dallas in the next round, and then probably Boston in the finals. But I'm hoping Minnesota wins, because I think it'd be great for a young guy like Anthony to win an NBA title at this point of his career with the quality team behind him. And for Minnesota, obviously, this would be excellent, right? Minnesota definitely deserves some positivity after all the years and years of disappointing performances from their team, even when they had star players like Kevin Garnett. But yeah, so that was pretty exciting, even though my team did lose, but we'll be back next year. Believe me. Then, of course, we had yesterday's game, which was, quite the matchup between two of the top three MVP caliber players in the NBA. Obviously, Gilchrist Alexander, my Canadian brethren, and then Luka, who I felt deserved to win this year's MVP. Guy put up 34, 9.5, 9.5, basically, basically a triple double on better numbers than Westbrook put up when he ended up leading the league with a triple double. And better numbers than Shea Gilchrist did as well, right? And this was a guy who beat him in voting. And I think some of that was mostly because of how well his team performed this year. And sure, you got to respect him for having the best record in the NBA, or tied with Denver. Dallas, for their own part, obviously started the year pretty slow, made some trades midpoint through the year, which really complemented Luka and Kyrie, and defensively really helped them a lot. Obviously, they need that support on the boards as well, and that was a key thing in this playoffs, right? Winning the boards is one of the most integral parts of winning a series. If you dominate the boards, chances are you're going to win the playoff series. And that's one of the problems Denver had, right? Generally, Denver with Porter, what's his face, the dunker, and with Joker, generally do really well on the boards and pretty much dominate. But against Minnesota, who was a little more athletic, had a bit better bench, and were just hungrier, they couldn't do it. And in this playoff, it was similar. I mean, we knew Oak City, the problem is they don't have the depth. They don't have the big men. It's a lot to ask this skinny motherfucker to be like the inside dominant performer for this team. And then it leaves Shea to do everything, right? And unfortunately, that's asking too much, especially in the NBA playoffs. This has almost cost Luka and Dallas in Game 7. I mean, Kyrie Irving was playing terrible in the first half, and Luka, while he was doing well, obviously was really sort of pulling the team out of the best sort of momentum they could have because of the back and forth he was having with the refs, which obviously didn't really benefit his team as much as it benefited him. But going into this next round, I mean, it's pretty exciting to think about Minnesota versus Dallas, Ant versus Luka, two other MVP caliber players running into each other once again. Obviously, playing different positions, but in switches and stuff, they're going to be matching up with each other probably a bit. You also had Ant, basically saying that he was going to be covering Kyrie Irving. Right, and that's what he just said in the interview with Charles Barkley on NBA, which means that who's probably going to be covering Luka, right? When you think about Minnesota and how they line up, I don't think that means they're going to have Conley covering Luka, because Luka will just body Conley all over the floor. But they could have my man, the long, skinny defender, who I can't think of his name, who played really well, especially today's game. Obviously, he brings tons of athleticism and tons of length, but he's also a real thin, frail dude who Luka is going to be able to back up into the paint at ease. So it'll be really interesting to see how these things match up. Obviously, down low, you got the big Frenchman, and then you have obviously what's his face, who's a very good face-up player. I'm favoring Minnesota because I'm just, as I said, I felt the team that won out of Minnesota and Denver was probably going to be the NBA champions, and nothing has changed, in my opinion, based on what I saw today. But let me know if you think anything differently. Then, of course, we have Boston, who got by the Cavaliers. Unfortunately, the Cavs had Allen, who got injured. It was unfortunate he didn't fucking play, because he really would have probably been the difference, I think, with them actually winning this series. Them having that extra length, size, and the ability to dominate on the boards. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. You put too much work on the star point guard, shooting guard for the Cavs. Um, and I think they played well, but the problem is they're a little sized in the guard position compared to Boston, who have, pretty big guards, even though they don't have big forwards. And obviously, because of their guard length with Brown, Tatum, my other man that they got from Milwaukee, all those dudes are like over 6'5", and very long, right? So playing the passing lanes is very tough. They also can contribute a lot on the rebound, on the boards as well because of their length. They ended up winning. And I think it's disappointing that Allen didn't muscle himself through. I think he really would have been important. But, unfortunately, whether it was heart, whether it was just that the injury was that bad, even though from what I heard, it doesn't seem as if that was really the issue. It seemed like his teammates were a little disappointed he didn't try to get out there. And in a moment like this, I cannot understand why a brother wouldn't get his ass out there, tape up his ribs, do whatever he had to do just to get out there and perform, right? Like, I played sports, and obviously not at this level, but the emphasis on winning, right? You know, couldn't keep you off the floor as a kid. So what's it going to do as an athlete who makes millions of dollars and is in a point of his career that is, huge? And you may never be in a position to duplicate this again. So you better put out your best where you can. And unfortunately, I think some of his teammates felt he didn't do that. Unfortunately, the Cavs big men were a little too soft, and I think that's what cost them against Boston, right? You can be big, but if you don't play big, it ain't going to help you. Then, of course, we get into this one. I stated in one of my last videos that my coworker felt pretty confident that New York was going to beat Indiana, but I did not see how the Knicks were going to combat with Indiana's big men, Siakam and the other big guy, the stretch three. And, don't get me wrong, Indiana is pretty similar to the Cavaliers, who also have two big men, one of whom also is a stretch four, stretch five. And the problem is, you have these big guys, but they're not fucking that tough. They're not that, they don't have that much dog in them, or it doesn't really show to the extent where you think it should, especially in the playoffs. And I think they almost blew it. I mean, I think they did pick it up in the end, the last two games, and that was really the difference, right? When they got blown out in one game, and then I think, the coach really gave them a slap in the head to say, fucking wake up, dudes. You're playing a team that size-wise can't compete with you. I mean, Hart, who's like 6'4", 6'5", was probably the most dominant rebounder on the floor. And you think you're being out-rebounded by a fucking guard, right? Like, what does that tell you? You better post, you better box somebody out. You better show some intensity, and you better work hard to dominate the boards. And sure enough, Indiana did that. I felt they had good enough guards to compete with New York. Unfortunately, New York, being such a small team, injuries continued to play out, and obviously that was an impediment moving through this series, and obviously would have become more of an impediment because we know my man broke his hand going into the Boston series. So it's kind of good in a sense that it worked out the way it did, because it would have been very disappointing if New York would have went into the playoffs in the semis and not actually had their best player perform. Right, which would have meant that they would have basically just been overrun. But now Indiana, I think they can build some confidence from this. They have very good depth, and I think the same situation they have could really benefit them versus Boston. And I think they can definitely compete with Boston's guards. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Unlike New York's guards, who are small and fast and just bombers from the three-point range, Boston's guards are a little bigger, a little slower, right? They're not going to make you run as much, but they're going to body you up more. And I think for Indiana, that potentially could be a better matchup for them. So it's not that I'm saying Indiana is going to beat Boston, but as I stated from the beginning, I don't have a lot of confidence in Boston. So if they do get beat by Indiana, I won't be surprised. So here we go. This is what I think is going to be the finals. The Wolves versus Boston. And I just don't think Boston can really compete in a 7-game series against Minnesota. Obviously, they can win games and they can compete from one game to another. But to compete over 7 games with the depth and the size and just the defensive intensity that Minnesota has shown, I mean, Boston don't have a joker who's going to be dominating possession and you know doing what he did against Denver, right? You have Tatum, but we know Tatum sort of comes up short in the fourth. You got Brown, who's good, but sort of takes a step backwards to Tatum. And then after that, who do you got? You got two other good guards, right? So you got like a good 4 guard rotation. I know Tatum and Brown, you can call them forwards all you want, but okay. So you got like 2 dudes that are 6'7" and 2 dudes that are like 6'5". And then you got a big man down low. Are you going to play Horford? Horford's good, but Horford's not going to be able to compete with Minnesota down low, not with the 3 monster rotation that they have coming from the big men, especially with what's his face, Cat jumping out, shooting threes, taking off the dribble. He's too young, offensively too versatile for Horford to compete in a 7-game series. So I do think Minnesota is going to go on to win, and I'm excited about it. I think it'd be great to see Cat and Ant become NBA champions at this point of their career. And we know historically having 2 good all-star caliber players like this, with obviously great complementary players surrounding them, it is really the perfect sort of recipe for NBA playoff success, right? We've seen it all along. Whether you got Pippen, Jordan, whether you got fucking Kobe and Shaq, right? This has always been the perfect sort of scenario. Obviously, Dallas feels maybe with Luka and Kyrie, they got that. But I'm not so confident with Kyrie, even though he's shown moments during this playoffs, obviously carried the team at moments, hit big giant shots that, catapulted them to where they were. So you got to give him full credit for what he's done. But the first half inconsistency he consistently shows, I think that eventually is going to bite them in the ass. And as for Boston, like I said, I would not be surprised if Boston loses to Indiana. But at the same time, I don't think Indiana, even though I think they're a better matchup for Minnesota, is going to beat Minnesota. Even though I'd be pretty excited to watch Indiana, Minnesota in the finals, because I think stylistically it's a good matchup, right? The 2 big men match up pretty well. The guards match up nice. It'll be a pretty interesting setup between them. And then you get 2 of the better young guards in the league, right? So, let me know in the comment section below what you think about this playoff run and how it's sort of setting up overall. Do you agree with my take, or do you have some different opinions? Feel free to leave in the comment section below. I love to talk ball, so feel free to engage. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. I'd really appreciate it. Obviously, as a new channel with relations to basketball, the more that people share and the more people watch, the better it is for just YouTube actually putting out there so people can find the channel. I have a boxing channel, and I have 600 people. I had a channel that had 7,000 people, but it got closed down. And so, people still can't find this channel. I have to give them literally a link. Otherwise, they find it virtually impossible. Even if they put my name, YouTube still doesn't direct them to me. So feel free, please. Thank you very much, to share the videos, for anybody who you think likes basketball. And obviously give it a like, thumbs up, and I'd appreciate that. And we're going to have some more content, obviously, moving forward. Obviously, we have the NBA draft coming up soon, which is going to be pretty interesting. We have some college basketball. Obviously, Kentucky is going through a huge change, so I'm going to be talking about their new roster with the new manager. Obviously, Cal just went to Arkansas, and we're going to be looking at Arkansas as well, because it'll be interesting to see how Arkansas sort of sets up with Cal taking his high school players over there. And then obviously we have the NBA semifinals and the finals coming up as well. So there's a lot of things to discuss related to basketball. So I'm going to get back on that as soon as possible. Look forward to seeing that Kentucky basketball video this week. So I'll see you next time. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. And yeah, have a good week, everyone. Peace out.